Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Tackling Your Taxes, where we're going to be talking about claiming an unreceived 2020 or 2021 stimulus payment. My name is Aisha Servati, and I'm the Clinic Director of the Low-Income Taxpayer Clinic at Mid-Minnesota Legal Aid. So to give an overview of this Facebook Live, we're going to be first talking about what are economic impact payments or stimulus payments, as they're commonly known as, who qualifies for an economic impact payment, how do you claim an economic impact payment now, what if you're unsure if you received a payment, and some helpful resources. So first, what are economic impact payments or EIPs? They are advance payments of 2020 and 2021 tax credits, which are refundable, known as the recovery rebate credit. And by refundable, that means that you receive the difference on a tax return. Even if you don't owe any taxes, then you would receive that amount back to you. So there were 3 rounds of economic impact payments or stimulus payments. The first round was according to the CARES Act, and that one was the amount of $1,200 per individual for single or married filing separately, $2,400 for married filing jointly, and then an additional $500 per qualifying dependent. A qualifying dependent was a child aged 16 and under during that first round. And there are, with each of these rounds, and as noted on the slide, an income amount. So if your income was less than or equal to $75,000, then you would receive that full amount. And then the amount would be reduced by your income over $75,000. With income up to $99,000 with no children, for example, for that single or married filing separately. And so you'll see that on the slides for each of these rounds. Rounds 1 and 2 had similar amounts for income, with married filing jointly being up to $150,000 for that full amount, or up to $198,000 with no children. Until it's phased out and you're uneligible. So you want to make sure that if you didn't receive the amount, you want to check what your income was for 2020 and 2021 to see if you would qualify for the full amount of the economic impact payment or a partial amount. So that first round, again, was through the CARES Act and was $1,200 for an individual, and $500 per qualifying dependent. The second round was according to the Consolidated Appropriations Act, and that was $600 per individual for single or married filing separately, $1,200 for married filing jointly, and then an additional $600 per qualifying child. And again, that dependent child was age 16 and under. Then there's the third round of economic impact payments, which were according to the American Rescue Plan, and that was $1,400 per individual. And you'll see that, again, it was that baseline of $75,000 for income, this time only up to $80,000 before it phased out. Was $2,800 for those married filing jointly, with up to $160,000 for that full phase out, and then additional full $1,400 per qualifying dependent. And the definition of a dependent did change during that third round, which I'll talk about in a moment. So 2020 was economic impact payments 1 and 2, and economic impact payment number 3 was in 2021. So in general, to qualify for an economic impact payment, you needed to have not been claimed as a dependent by someone else, not be a non-resident alien, and you must have a valid Social Security number. So if any of those apply, where you were claimed as a dependent, where you are a resident alien, or where you don't have a Social Security number, then you would not qualify for an economic impact payment. So that could be one reason why, if you didn't receive one, perhaps you were claimed as a dependent by someone else, and I'll be talking a little bit more about that later, or perhaps you didn't have a Social Security number where you yourself wouldn't be eligible. And then during the first round of economic impact payments, everyone on the tax return must have had a valid Social Security number in order for anyone to get an economic impact payment. That did change, as I'll talk about in a moment, with the other economic impact payments. So there was that special rule for economic impact payment number 2, where spouses with valid Social Security numbers are eligible even if the other spouse has an ITIN, so long as they're married filing jointly. So that made it so that the spouse with the Social Security number is eligible for an amount such as the $600 or $1,400 or $1,200. And then there were some additional rule changes for economic impact payment number 3, which made it more available for people. The term dependent was expanded to include those ages 17 to 24, as well as older dependents. The dependent's economic impact payment was issued to the taxpayer claiming the dependent. So it's one thing to note that in case you didn't receive the economic impact payment, but you were claimed by someone else as a dependent, that economic impact payment that was for you was sent to the taxpayer claiming you. And then any family member with a valid Social Security number is eligible for the third economic impact payment. So that means that children with Social Security numbers, even if their parents have ITINs, they are still eligible themselves, the children, for the additional $1,400 economic impact payment per child. So now claiming an economic impact payment. So if you didn't get an economic impact payment at all, or you didn't get the full amount, what you need to do is you need to file a tax return. It's the only way to get your economic impact payment. So you would file a tax return, even if you don't normally have a filing obligation for those years, you would still file. And it's just a simple tax return in order to claim that recovery rebate credit. Or if you did file a tax return, but you didn't claim the recovery rebate credit on your tax return, you do an amended return, a 1040X. And so on an original return, a 1040, it's line 30, the recovery rebate credit. On a 2020 tax return, again, for that EIP1 and EIP2, and then a 2021 tax return for EIP3. And then the IRS did send notices or letters to individuals stating the amount of economic impact payment that they received. And those were notices 1444 for economic impact payment 1, 144B for economic impact payment number 2, and letter 6475 for economic impact payment number 3. So if you did receive those letters, if you happen to have kept them, you'll want to use those when filing your tax return. But if you don't have them or didn't keep them, that's okay. That's just helpful to know what was sent to you by the government by stating what economic impact payment your amount was. So again, in order to get an economic impact payment, you need to make sure that you file a tax return. And so at the LITC, at MMLA, we don't prepare or file tax returns, but we do recommend that you can file on your own if you have and use free software available through TaxSlayer or different IRS partners. And you can also find free tax preparation sites that are still open this filing season by searching irs.gov/VITA or going to the Minnesota Department of Revenue website and searching free tax preparation. And then there's a whole database of the over 200 tax preparation sites in the state of Minnesota. So then your question you might have is, what if I'm unsure if I did receive the full amount of the economic impact payment or if I did receive the economic impact payment itself? And so there are 3 different options that you can do if you're unsure if you received the full amount or wanting to verify that you even received the economic impact payment. The first one is you can request a copy of your IRS tax account transcripts, and you can do those through creating an irs.gov online account, or you can submit an IRS form 4506T. And what this will do is it'll allow you to see when and how much each economic payment was issued. Another option that you would have is requesting a payment trace of the economic impact payment itself. by submitting a Form 3911. And then this will result in a copy of any paper check that was mailed, or it will include the bank and bank account number that the economic impact payment was issued to. So if it shows that a check was issued, it'll show who signed for it, when it was cashed. If that was not you, for example, and if a check was issued and then cashed, and you can show that it wasn't you that did that, you can ask the IRS to reissue a new check. The same thing can be done if the check was issued but never actually cashed. And the same information can be used if a bank account was used. You can show that that was not your bank account number, that it's not a bank account associated with you, for example, if there was an error made on the return itself or when the IRS issued the economic impact payment. Something to note is that depending on the economic impact payment, the IRS actually used information from 2018, 2019, or 2020 in order to determine if you were eligible at the time and then issue the payments. So if, for example, economic impact payment number 1 was based on a 2018 or 2019 return, then that could have went to a bank account that you no longer had access to, or to an address that you no longer lived at. So those are just things to remember. So it can be really helpful to file that IRS Form 3911. Another thing that you can do is you can look at your bank statements, and it'll show from IRS Treasury, IRS Trez, with a notation of tax EIP on your bank account statement. And so that can be helpful just to see, okay, during 2020 or during 2021, during 2020, it was in the months of like March and April, and then December, January 2021 for economic impact payments 1 and 2. And economic impact payment numbers 3 was about March and April of 2021, just to give you a general idea of when they were deposited in accounts. But it could be at any point in 2020 or 2021, as the IRS had millions of payments to make and returns to process. So it could have been at a later time as well. Then something to do is if you believe someone erroneously claimed you as a dependent on their 2020 or 2021 tax return, or someone otherwise stole your identity and filed a fraudulent return, then you want to file your own 2020 or 2021 tax return based on which economic impact payment you're claiming. And then you'll also want to file what's called a Form 14039 or identity theft affidavit. Or you can go to identitytheft.gov, answer some questions, and they will electronically fill out and submit that 14039 on your behalf. And if you're feeling overwhelmed at all over the whole process or unsure what steps to take, you can contact us at the LITC, and we're available to answer questions that you might have and help you fill out those IRS forms or get copies of your transcripts, for example. One thing I also do want to note is that for tax year 2020, you only have 3 years to claim a refund. And that recovery rebate credit is on the tax return as refundable credit. And so you only have this tax filing season in order to still claim economic impact payments 1 and 2. So if you have not received them, you are going to want to make sure that you file a return immediately in order to claim those credits. There was an extension to May 17th of 2021 at the time for tax year 2020. If you never filed a return, you have until May 17th of 2024 in order to claim the recovery rebate credit, those economic impact payments 1 and 2. But if you had filed a return and you're needing to do an amended return because perhaps you filed a return not knowing that you could have claimed them on there as the recovery rebate credit, then you only have until April 15th of this year, 2024, in order to claim that credit. So just some helpful resources. Again, if you need any assistance with any tax issues, you can call Mid-Minnesota Legal Aid at 612-334-5970. Just a reminder again that the LITC does not prepare taxes, but you can find assistance through a volunteer Income Tax Assistance site or VITA site. And you can go to irs.gov/VITA, or again, the Minnesota Department of Revenue website, searching free tax preparation. And Law Help MN has an amazing array of legal resources for a variety of civil topics. And there are more tax resources as well. So if you have questions about any credits that you might be claiming on a tax return, or about claiming a dependent, for example, or about the Minnesota Renters Rebate Credit, or the Minnesota K through 12 credit and subtraction, for example, you can go to lawhelpmn.org and find fact sheets in a variety of languages on these topics. So that's everything I have for this week's Tackling Your Taxes episode. And I will see you in 2 weeks, where we're going to be talking about claiming gambling losses on your tax return. Thank you.